Sarah Walker checked her phone at the red light and her stomach dropped. The text glowed accusingly. Looking forward to dinner at Aurelio's. 7 p.m. Tables under Chen. 7 p.m. She glanced at the dashboard clock. 6:43. Her best friend Jessica had set up this blind date 3 weeks ago, and Sarah had completely, utterly forgotten. She looked down at herself and wanted to scream. Torn jeans with actual holes at the knees. Not the fashionable kind, but the earned-through work kind. An oversized grey hoodie splattered with cream-coloured paint. Her old sneakers were scuffed beyond recognition. She'd spent the entire afternoon at Riverside Homeless Shelter, repainting their community room with a group of volunteers. Paint streaked her forearms. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun that had given up any pretense of order 4 hours ago. The light turned green. She could go home, shower, change, and text an apology about being late. But home was 30 minutes in the opposite direction, and she'd already cancelled on this mystery man twice before. Jessica had been mysteriously insistent about this date, refusing to give details beyond "trust me" and "he's different." Sarah made a split-second decision and turned toward downtown. She'd show up, apologize for her appearance, offer to reschedule, and at least she wouldn't be the person who stood him up. That was the plan. Simple, straightforward, minimizing the damage to her already questionable dating reputation. Aurelio's was the kind of restaurant Sarah had only read about in magazines. The kind where women wore cocktail dresses for Tuesday dinner and men's watches cost more than her car. She pulled into the parking garage, found a spot between a Mercedes and a Tesla, and felt her Honda Civic shrink with embarrassment. In the rearview mirror, she tried to fix her hair, gave up, and wiped a streak of paint off her cheek. This was going to be a disaster. A quick disaster, but still a disaster. The restaurant's entrance gleamed with polished brass and soft golden lighting. A couple walked out as she approached, the woman in a black dress that probably cost a month of Sarah's rent, the man in a suit that fit like it had been painted on. They both glanced at Sarah with thinly veiled confusion. She pushed through the heavy glass door anyway. The hostess stand was marble, the flowers were real orchids, and the hostess herself looked like she'd stepped off a runway. Her smile was professionally warm until her eyes traveled down Sarah's paint-stained outfit. The warmth flickered like a candle in wind. "Good evening. How can I help you?" The question carried the unspoken addition, "Are you sure you're in the right place?" "I have a reservation. Sarah Walker. Should be under the name Chen." Sarah's voice came out steadier than she felt. The hostess tapped her tablet, eyebrows rising slightly. "Ah, yes. Mr. Chen is already here. He's in our private dining section. If you'll follow me." The way she phrased it made it sound like a question, like she was giving Sarah one last chance to admit this was all a mistake. Sarah nodded and followed her through the main dining room. Every table they passed felt like a judgment. A woman in pearls actually turned in her seat to stare. A waiter nearly stumbled while carrying a wine bottle, his eyes catching on Sarah's outfit with barely concealed shock. The private section was separated by frosted glass panels etched with elegant swirls. The hostess led her to a corner booth, beautifully lit by a small chandelier, with a view of the city lights beginning to sparkle as dusk settled. And there he was. The man Jessica had promised would be different. He sat with perfect posture, one hand resting on the white tablecloth, the other holding his phone. His navy suit was immaculate, perfectly tailored to broad shoulders. His dark hair was styled with precision. Even from behind, he radiated the kind of confidence that came from success and achievement. This was clearly someone important. Someone who belonged here. Sarah's feet nearly turned around on their own. This was so far beyond a mismatch it was almost funny. Almost. The hostess cleared her throat delicately. "Mr. Chen, your guest has arrived." He looked up from his phone, and Sarah got her first look at his face. Strong jawline, intelligent dark eyes, maybe early 30s. Handsome in that effortless way some people achieved without seeming to try. And right now, those intelligent eyes were widening as they took in her appearance. For 3 endless seconds, nobody spoke. Sarah watched his expression, waiting for the disappointment, the confusion, maybe the polite but firm dismissal. She'd seen that look before on other dates, though never in such an expensive setting. But then something unexpected happened. His face shifted, not into disappointment but into something like curiosity. Interest, even. He stood smoothly, and Sarah realized he was tall, maybe 6'2", with an athletic build under that perfect suit. His smile, when it came, reached his eyes and felt completely genuine. "You must be Sarah." His voice was warm, cultured, with the faintest hint of an accent she couldn't quite place. He moved around the table and pulled out her chair like this was completely normal, like women showed up to dinner at Aurelio's in paint-stained hoodies every day. Please, sit. I'm Marcus Chen. The hostess retreated, probably to gossip with the other staff about the bizarre pairing. Sarah sat, feeling the soft leather of the chair, acutely aware of how out of place she was. I have to apologize, she started immediately, the words tumbling out. I completely forgot about our date. I was volunteering at a homeless shelter downtown. We were repainting their community room, and I lost track of time, and I only saw your text at 6:43, and I knew I should have gone home to change, but I'd already cancelled twice, and I didn't want to be that person who stands someone up, so I came straight here. But I understand if you want to reschedule because I look like I just crawled out of a dumpster, and this is Aurelio's, and you're clearly. She gestured at his perfect suit, his expensive watch, the entire situation. And I'm. She gestured at herself. Marcus held up a hand gently, stopping her spiral. He was smiling, not the polite smile of someone trying to hide disappointment, but a real smile that created small lines around his eyes. You volunteer at a homeless shelter. Something in his voice had shifted. The professional politeness had cracked, revealing genuine interest underneath. Yes. Riverside Shelter on 8th Street. I've been going every Tuesday and Thursday for about 2 years now. Sarah relaxed slightly. This she could talk about. This was real. What made you start? He leaned forward, elbows on the table, giving her his complete attention. His phone lay forgotten face down on the tablecloth. Sarah paused, surprised by the intensity of his focus. Most people asked about her volunteer work with polite interest, the kind of interest that expected a brief, modest answer before moving to other topics. Marcus Chen was looking at her like she held the answer to something he'd been searching for. I used to think making a difference meant something big. Some dramatic gesture. But one day, I met a woman named Rita at the shelter. She'd lost her job, then her apartment, ended up on the streets with her daughter. She told me the hardest part wasn't the hunger or the cold. It was how invisible she felt. How people looked through her like she didn't exist. Sarah's voice softened with the memory. I realized I could see her. I could see all of them. That was something. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He just watched her with those dark eyes, and Sarah had the strangest feeling he understood something she hadn't said aloud. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter. My mother and I lived in a shelter when I was 7 years old. For 8 months. I remember that invisibility. The confession hung between them, raw and unexpected. Here was this man in his $1,000 suit, admitting to a past that didn't match his present. Sarah's perception of him shifted entirely in that moment. A waiter appeared, professional and courteous, pretending not to notice Sarah's inappropriate attire. They ordered without really looking at the menu, both too focused on the conversation beginning to unfold. When the waiter left, Marcus asked another question. What does the shelter need most right now? Not what she did there. Not how she felt about it. What they needed. The question of someone who understood the difference between charity and actual help. An hour dissolved into the evening like sugar in warm water, sweet and imperceptible. Sarah had forgotten about her paint-stained hoodie, forgotten about the elegant restaurant around them, forgotten about everything except the man sitting across from her who listened like every word she spoke mattered. Marcus Chen had done something she'd never seen anyone do on a first date. He'd stopped performing. His phone lay untouched on the table, screen dark and ignored. His assistant had called twice, the vibration visible against the white tablecloth, and he'd rejected both calls without even glancing at the screen. Sarah would later learn this was unprecedented. Marcus Chen never ignored calls. His company, Chen Technologies, operated across 4 continents. He had 2,000 employees depending on his decisions. But right now, in this moment, none of that existed. The biggest challenge isn't food or beds, Sarah was saying, her hands moving as she spoke, animated by passion. We've got donors for that. It's the after. What happens when someone's ready to leave the shelter but has no job skills, no recent work history, no way to break the cycle? She paused, took a sip of water. They'd ordered wine but neither had touched it. We started a job training program 6 months ago. Basic computer skills, resume writing, interview preparation. But we are running it on 5 donated computers from 2015 that crash constantly. We can only train 3 people at a time. There's a waiting list of 47 people. Marcus's expression had changed as she spoke. Something sharp and focused had entered his eyes, the look of a man solving a problem in real time. What would the ideal setup look like? He asked, leaning forward. Sarah laughed, a slightly bitter sound. In an ideal world? We'd have 15 modern computers, proper software, maybe partner with local businesses for internship placements. We'd be able to train people in actual marketable skills, not just how to use Microsoft Word from a decade ago. She shook her head. But equipment like that costs money the shelter doesn't have. We are grant-funded and donations barely cover operating costs. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He pulled out his phone, and Sarah felt a small disappointment, thinking she'd finally bored him, that he was checking messages or looking for an escape route from this date with the underdressed social worker who couldn't stop talking about homeless shelters. But instead, he scrolled through his contacts, selected a name, and put the phone to his ear. David, I need you to arrange something. His voice had shifted into a different register, authoritative and certain. This was CEO Marcus Chen, the man who built a tech empire before turning 35. Sarah sat frozen, not understanding what was happening. 15 laptops. Top specifications. I want them to have everything, full software packages, Microsoft Office, Adobe Suite, antivirus, the works. Set them up for a professional training environment. He paused, listening. Tomorrow morning, first thing. I don't care if you have to pull people from the weekend off. Pay overtime. Another pause. His eyes flicked to Sarah. What's the address? She stammered out the Riverside shelter address, her mind struggling to process what was occurring. Marcus repeated it into the phone. Bill everything to my personal account, not company. And David, send someone who can set up a proper network, secure Wi-Fi, the full infrastructure. I want this done right. He listened for another moment. Because it matters. That's why. I'll explain Monday. He ended the call and set the phone down, looking at Sarah like he'd just done something perfectly ordinary, like ordering coffee. Her eyes had filled with tears. She blinked rapidly, trying to maintain composure in this elegant restaurant, but emotion overwhelmed her anyway. Marcus, you can't. That's probably $40,000 worth of equipment. $42,000, roughly, with the setup and software licensing, he corrected calmly. It's nothing. It's not nothing. It's everything. Do you understand what this means? We can train 12 people simultaneously now. We can run morning and afternoon sessions. That's potentially 200 people a year getting real skills, real chances. Her voice cracked slightly. Why would you do this? You just met me. You don't even know if the shelter is legitimate, if I'm legitimate. Marcus reached across the table slowly, telegraphing his movement, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. His hand covered hers, warm and solid and real. Jessica told me a few things about you before setting up this date. She said you were someone who actually lived what she believed, not just talked about it. She said you'd probably show up in jeans and wouldn't apologize for who you are. He smiled slightly. She was wrong about that last part. You apologized immediately. But she was right about everything else. Sarah's heart was beating too fast. His hand stayed on hers, and she didn't want him to move it. You still didn't answer my question. Why? Marcus was quiet for a moment, his thumb moving almost unconsciously across her knuckles. I've sat across from hundreds of people in the last 10 years. Business partners, investors, competitors, dates Jessica and other well-meaning friends set up. Everyone wants something from Marcus Chen, CEO. They dress right, say the right things, laugh at the right moments. They perform. His eyes held hers with an intensity that made breathing difficult. You walked in here covered in paint because you spent your afternoon helping people who society has decided don't matter. You forgot about dinner at one of the city's most expensive restaurants because you were too busy actually making a difference to remember you were supposed to impress someone. His hand tightened slightly on hers. You didn't perform, Sarah. You just were. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How valuable? She couldn't speak. Couldn't find words for what was happening between them, this connection forming faster than logic should allow. Around them, the restaurant continued its elegant rhythm. Waiters glided past with expensive bottles. Other diners laughed softly over their meals. The city lights twinkled through the windows. But in their corner booth, time had become something different, something slower and more significant. Their food arrived, beautifully plated dishes that probably took chefs hours to perfect. They ate slowly, conversation flowing into different territories now. Marcus told her about growing up in foster care until age 9, when Margaret and Thomas Chen adopted him. They gave me everything, he said quietly. Education, opportunity, love, their name. My mother, Margaret, she used to volunteer at a youth center in our neighborhood. She'd take me with her. She taught me that success without purpose is just accumulation. Sarah learned he'd built Chen Technologies from nothing, starting in a shared office space with 2 other programmers and an idea about data security. 10 years later, his company protected information for half the Fortune 500. Money becomes meaningless after a certain point, he admitted. It's just numbers. I've got more than I could spend in 5 lifetimes. But this, he gestured between them, encompassing the conversation, the connection, the computers he'd just donated, this means something. They talked about books they'd loved, terrible movies they'd secretly enjoyed, the small rituals that made life bearable during hard times. Sarah learned Marcus ran every morning at 6 a.m., the same route through the park regardless of weather, because the routine kept him grounded when everything else spun too fast. Marcus learned Sarah sang off-key in her car without shame, that she stress-baked cookies at midnight and delivered them to the shelter the next day, that she dropped out of a prestigious law program because she realized she'd only been pursuing it to make her parents proud, not because it made her happy. What did your parents say when you quit? Marcus asked. They didn't talk to me for 6 months. Sarah's voice was matter-of-fact, but pain flickered beneath. They came around eventually, but they still don't understand why I work at a non-profit making $43,000 a year when I could have been a lawyer making 6 figures. Do you regret it? She didn't hesitate. Not for a single second. I sleep well at night. Can most lawyers say that? Marcus laughed, a real laugh that transformed his serious face into something younger and lighter. Fair point. The restaurant began to empty as the evening stretched toward 10 p.m. They were the last diners in the private section, and the staff was too professional to rush them, but Sarah could sense the subtle shifts of people waiting to close. Marcus handled the bill discreetly, refusing to let her even glance at it. Outside, the night air was cool and perfect. They stood on the sidewalk, neither quite ready for the evening to end. I'd like to see you again, Marcus said. Not a question, but not quite a statement either. Something hopeful suspended between them. I'd like that too. Sarah smiled. But fair warning, I don't own any dresses that belong in restaurants like this. Good. Next time I'm taking you somewhere that serves the best tacos in the city. I'll wear jeans. He paused, something vulnerable crossing his face. Would you let me visit the shelter? I'd like to see the program when the computers arrive. Maybe talk to some of the people you work with. 3 months passed like a beautiful dream that somehow turned real. Marcus kept his promise about the tacos, showing up in jeans and a t-shirt that proved he was just as attractive in casual clothes. They explored the city together, finding hidden coffee shops and bookstores, attending a terrible community theater production that made them laugh until they cried. He came to the shelter every Thursday evening, not as a donor checking his investment but as someone genuinely interested in the people there. The job training program flourished with the new equipment. Rita, the woman Sarah had mentioned on their first date, completed the program and landed a job at a small accounting firm. Her daughter sent Sarah a drawing of their new apartment. Marcus introduced Sarah to his world too. She attended a company gala wearing a simple black dress from a department store, standing next to Marcus in his tuxedo, meeting technology giants and venture capitalists who probably had more money than small countries. She felt out of place at first, but Marcus never left her side, his hand constant at her back, his pride in introducing her obvious and unashamed. This is Sarah Walker. She runs the job training program at Riverside Shelter. Not my girlfriend, the social worker. Not anyone diminished or defined by him. Just Sarah, doing work that mattered. On a Thursday evening in autumn, Marcus asked Sarah to come to the shelter at 6 p.m., earlier than his usual time. She arrived to find the computer lab filled with people. Rita and her daughter, the other program graduates, current trainees, shelter staff, and standing in the middle of it all, Marcus Chen. He wore jeans and the same grey hoodie she'd worn on their first date. He'd bought it specially, paint splatters and all, from a costume designer. The room erupted in laughter when Sarah saw it. You're insane, she said, but she was laughing too, walking toward him through the crowd of people who'd become family over the years. Marcus took her hands, suddenly serious despite the ridiculous outfit. 3 months ago, you walked into my life dressed exactly like this, and you showed me something I'd forgotten. That real wealth has nothing to do with bank accounts. That the richest people are the ones who make other lives better just by showing up. He dropped to one knee, and Sarah's hands flew to her mouth. I've spent 10 years building a company, accumulating success, being someone important. But I've never been as happy as I am right now, wearing this ridiculous hoodie, surrounded by people whose lives you've changed. Marry me, Sarah. Let me spend the rest of my life learning from you. The ring was perfect, simple, and elegant. Probably expensive but understated enough not to feel ostentatious. Sarah's eyes blurred with tears as she nodded. Yes. Obviously yes. The shelter erupted in cheers. Rita's daughter blew a party horn someone had brought. Marcus stood and kissed her, and it felt like coming home. Later, when Sarah's parents asked how a social worker had landed a tech CEO, when his board members questioned why Marcus Chen was marrying someone so far outside their world, when gossip columns ran photos with captions full of speculation, neither of them paid attention. They knew the truth that others couldn't see. She hadn't been dressed poorly on that first date. She'd been dressed like someone who'd spent her day changing lives. And in doing so, dressed exactly right to change his.